guys, it's Kevin again, my review for Ad Astra. And what Ad Astra is essentially about is we center on our main character, Roy McBride. He is this astronaut, and basically one day he is approached by a bunch of government agents who basically tell him that his father, who disappeared all these years ago and was presumed dead, basically has caused all of these experiments that is inadvertently, destroying the solar system. It could end up destroying Earth altogether. So basically, Roy has to do what he can to try to go back and figure out what his father was experimenting on, see if there was anything going on there, see, maybe what his father could have obtained, but also see if he can track down his father, who supposedly might not actually be dead, and that's really all I'm going to say. So, Ad Astra overall, I was very excited for this film. I mean, this to me seemed like one of the most just thrilling and riveting films of the entire year. I love me a good space movie. We've been getting a lot of really great ones lately with Arrival, First Man. I mean, they've really been very consistent for sure, and this seemed like it was going to be another really great one. I also love the fact that it was an original film that wasn't based off of previous work. We definitely need more of that for sure. I mean, such a talented cast, especially with Brad Pitt, who's really just having a great year overall. So I've seen the movie, and I will say this, Ad Astra overall is good. It is a good film, but it's not the film that you're probably expecting it to be. This is a far more meditative and, I would say, introspective film than you really are expecting, but one that I do think overall is worth checking out. But we're just getting to right now, starting off with the cast. And like I said, going into this film, I think that's definitely going to be a huge draw for many. The cast here is very, very talented. You have some really great cast members here, but easily the big standout of this entire film has to be Brad Pitt, who once again gives another incredible performance here, and really channeling his inner Ryan Gosling in this film, because similar to characters that Ryan Gosling plays, Roy is someone who is very emotionless in that way. There's a lot of emotional repression going on within him, so Pitt has to find a way to make this character relatable and also get us to connect with him without really emoting, and he does a fantastic job with that, I have to say. I mean, there's a lot that Roy has been through, and you really do get to see just how talented of an actor that Pitt really is. It's a very impressive performance in that way. There's one scene especially involving him crying. I don't want to get into the context of it or anything, but I thought Pitt did a really great job there for sure. And it also should be noted, a lot of this is actually done through voiceover, and Pitt does a really good job with just not having with conveying a lot of emotion with having very few dialogue, but also not being able to express it. It's really impressive the way he was able to do that here. I think he gives a really strong performance. It's not on the level like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or anything like that, but it is a really great performance for sure, and definitely deserves all of the acclaim it has gotten, because he was pretty fantastic here. But now I really want to get into the directing and the writing here, which the directing was another one of the things I was really excited for with this film. James Gray's previous film, Lost City of Zed, I thought was very well directed, and once again, with this film, he takes a concept that I think could be really familiar, and he actually does something different with it. He has his own style, and that's something that should be noted. This is not a blockbuster in any sense of the word. This is not a space adventure. It is far more of its own unique thing, and it's very ambitious in that way, and I really appreciate the fact that Gray did direct it. He knows exactly what kind of movie he's trying to go for here, something that is far more personal, something that is far more, like I said, meditative and philosophical in that way, and I really do appreciate the fact that he went for that here. I think his directing is really great. I think he concocts something that is really well done, and I was overall impressed by his directing here for sure. I think he did a really great job directing-wise. Now, the writing here, that's the thing that I think is going to throw off people the most when it comes to this film, because if you go into this film expecting like a big space adventure where it's this, guy trying to track down his father, and you see all these various adventures he has to go through, you're gonna be severely disappointed disappointed, because that's simply not what we're dealing with here. What it is instead is a very, like I said, personal journey of a guy going through space and seeing what his father has created and how this is affecting him as a human being. And I think the film overall does do a really good job with that. Roy is someone who, he, like I said, is very emotionally repressed because of abandonment issues with his father and things like that. And because of that, he does not really express a lot of things. He's compartmentalizing a lot of things throughout the movie. Because he just can't let it get to him in that way. And similar to how Neil Armstrong was like that in First Man, that's similar to Roy. He's the best guy for the job in that way because he doesn't let that stuff get to him. However, the film doesn't treat it that way. They treat it as Roy is someone who is dealing with a lot of emotional issues, and you see that throughout the film, and I think overall they do a really good job with that, and I really did like the main story here of him trying to track down his father, but also seeing what his father was really experimenting with. It's very interesting. I mean, his father possibly could be finding new life and things like that, and I think they do a good job with getting you overall invested into the story, and that's something I will say. Roy is a really well-written character in that way. He's someone who, like I said, he's got a lot of flaws. He has a very, he has a very, troubled relationship with his wife. He has made many mistakes, and he's trying to do what he can to help himself as a person. He takes this journey in space to help him really study himself as a person, and seeing what this does to his psyche, it is very effective trying to see him keep it together in that way. It's really well done, and I think the film does a really good job writing-wise on that aspect, and I really do appreciate that this film focuses less on just a bunch of space action and more on this, like I said, personal journey that Roy is going through. There's a lot of great hidden metaphors about abandonment, about regret, about just learning to be a human again, because like I said, Roy has very much closed himself off from people. He doesn't react as much to things as you or I would, and so because of that, he kind of has to learn how to do that again through going on this journey. There's one scene especially that I think very much illustrates that I think is particularly very effective, and I really do appreciate that the film did that. But that's where we also get to my negatives, where I feel like they focused on that a little too much and not enough on some of the secondary characters and the plot here. The plot here itself, while it is dived into, it's not as much as it should have been. I do think that the relation between Roy and his father, it is well explored for the most part. You get the sense that he was abandoned. You get the sense on how this has made him how he is today. And you also get to see what his father was experimenting with, and I think they do a good job with that. But if you notice, when it comes to acting, I only talked about Brad Pitt, and that's because the rest of the cast, while they're in this movie, they barely have anything to really work with here. Most of these characters, they don't feel like characters. Donald Sutherland, for example, fantastic actor, really only has about 10 to 15 minutes of screen time, and his role, while it is important, at the end of the day, it doesn't feel like he had very much to work with. It feels like he was kind of wasted here, and I was kind of sitting there like, what really is his purpose here? Is there a way that you could have gotten Roy there without even having this character in the movie? I kind of wondered if they could have done something like that. That very much did kind of bother me. Ruth Negga, another actress that I really do like, really is just resorted to just being an expositional mouthpiece to get Roy to understand something, and she's really only in the movie for like 5 minutes, and then she's gone, and that's it. But easily the biggest underutilization of them all has to be that of Liv Tyler. I mean, you watch the movie and the trailers especially, you think that Liv Tyler is like a lot to do here. You think that she'd play a really big role, and aside from the fact that, like I said, Roy has a lot of issues with his wife. These two have a very problematic marriage. You know, they're not very, he's very estranged from her. He doesn't really open up to her in the way he should. Aside from that, she's really not in this movie that much. All of those scenes you saw in the trailer, they're not in this movie. It's very odd. I don't know if it's because of the reshoots, but she's just not in here. She has one scene of dialogue, and everything else are just like brief glimpses of her. And I get it. The film is trying to put you in Roy's head in that way. It's trying to get you to understand how he feels about his wife, that he has a hard time opening up to her. So maybe that's why they don't do that. But because of that, it just feels very underwritten. I feel like they should have taken more time in showing Roy before he gets to the space mission, because they jump into it like pretty much right away, and I would have wanted at least like 10 to 20 minutes of us getting to see him before that. You could have had a scene with him and his wife where, you know, she's trying to talk to him about something and he just doesn't want to open up. Or you could have had a scene with them talking about his father. One of the scenes from the trailer, I don't think I would be complaining as much. I would at least say, okay, yes, she's underused, but they at least tried to do something. And here, she just felt incredibly underused to me, and it did make me feel like I could have gotten a lot more from this character. I definitely did want more from her overall. Again, she has a purpose, for sure, but she just isn't really in it all that much, and I was a bit disappointed by that overall. And again, the stuff they do, I did care about. I like seeing Roy's emotional journey. I like seeing Roy's transformation throughout the film, but it is a long journey, and it definitely, I think some people could get bored by, and I do think some people are going to be turned off by the fact that the movie isn't this space adventure. There are definitely some thrilling sequences for sure, like the space race scene, which you've seen. There's also a really thrilling scene involving this monkey. I don't want to get too much into it, but holy shit, they really went for it, and I think they did a really good job with that for sure. There was a very riveting scene, and stuff like that is really good. But like I said, for the most part, this film is trying to be a lot more quiet in that way. It's trying to be a lot more personal, and that might bother some people because the fact that it isn't a bombastic, you know, adrenaline rush kind of space film. But I do appreciate the fact that the film is going for something a lot more philosophical in that way. It's trying to be like a 2001. Now, this film isn't on that level or anything, but it's very much trying to be in the vein of that, and that's something I do appreciate about this film overall, and I think they did do a good job with that, for sure. I will admit some of the voiceovers can get a little much at times, but again, for the most part, they do a really good job with getting you to really examine the character of Roy McBride and seeing how he himself also examines himself throughout this mission, and I think they did a good job with that for the most part. However you feel about this movie, though, the one thing that I don't think anyone can deny is the cinematography here, which is nothing short of extraordinary. It is maybe the best that I have seen all this year. I mean, every single scene of Roy on space or him going on these planets, it looks so realistic to the point where you forget that it is visual effects. It really does show how far we've come. And look, First Man very much showed this last year, but I feel like Ad Astra takes it up to a whole new level. I mean, remember, this is supposed to be a futuristic looking world, and it looks almost as if you're actually there. It looks like these are real. This is actual outer space footage. Like Brad Pitt was actually in outer space, and he's actually on these beautiful planets and visiting these places, and it's absolutely spellbinding how they were able to do it. It's so mesmerizing to look at. You can't look away. There are so many just gorgeous scenes here, and I have no idea how they pulled it off as well as they did. The cinematography is just absolutely beautiful here. It is, I think, the film to beat at next year's Oscars. I very much do think this film is going to win visual effects for sure. I'll be very surprised if it doesn't. Just because of just how masterful it is. This film is an absolute technical masterpiece. There's not a single shot where it looks even somewhat artificial, and I think they pulled it off effortlessly. There's been a lot of films that have captured space very well. I feel like this might be the best of the decade in terms of effects. I was so impressed by the way it was done, and you've seen shots in the trailer that look amazing, nothing compared to the actual movie. It is absolutely unparalleled, and I am so mesmerized by how good it really did look here. It was absolutely incredible. The score as well by Max Richter is fantastic here. It's very haunting. I mean, it's Max Richter, so you shouldn't be too surprised. He's one of the best composers out there right now, but it's very meditative. It's very haunting. everything, and it really hooks you into the environment of the story, which, like I said, is very calm and almost blissful in that way. He really does ooze in on quietness. He really does a great job with that for sure, and I thought the score was very effective here. Richter does a really great job with that throughout the film. So yeah, I thought the score was fantastic. The sound mixing as well is fantastic. What I really love about the sound design is how they really treat it as if you are in space. There's a lot of moments of just quietness, and I think that's going to get some people annoyed just because of the film doesn't feel cinematic in that way, but I actually like the fact that they did that. I actually love the fact that it felt more realistic. Like, it felt like if someone were to go onto outer space, this is how it would feel. It is very quiet at points. It definitely has a real sort of silence to it. It really embraces it, and I really appreciate the fact the sound design went there. It definitely has its moments of, bombasticness and things like that, but it really scales back and is far more quiet than you are expecting, and I thought they did a good job with that for the most part. I was very impressed with the sound design here. The editing, though, that's where we get to one of my other flaws with the film besides the stuff I talked about with the writing. I do think this film is a little too long, for sure. I think the second act very much does drag. There are sections of the film that I think could have been cut out altogether. And I do think that some of the voiceover did feel a little bit too on the nose. There were moments where you could very much tell how Ray was feeling, but the film felt like it needed to spell it out to you, and I wasn't really about that. But I also feel like the film needed to be a little bit longer as well, because like I said, I felt like the film took a little too quickly to get into the mission. It just kind of threw you in there, where I feel like we need to spend at least 10 to 20 minutes of Roy before he actually gets on the mission, where we can see stuff with his wife. We can see how he actually is, because we don't really get to see that as much, and I think the film kind of glossed over some of that, and I think overall it would have just made for an effective experience, a little bit more of an effective experience altogether. But overall, Ad Astra is a really well done film. It definitely does fall short of a couple things for sure. I think some characters are a bit underutilized. I think they could have spent a little bit more time before they got into the overall mission. But the film does do a really good job with its story. I think that it's far more personal. Its metaphors are really well done. I really do appreciate what the film is going for. Technically, I mean, it is just a marvel to look at. It is game-changing. I can't believe it turned out as well as it did. Max Richter's score is fantastic. It definitely has some really thrilling sequences for sure. Brad Pitt is fantastic, really playing a role like he never has before, and I really did appreciate that here. Like I said, it does feel underwritten, and there are some aspects that I would have wanted a little more from, but overall, I was very much impressed by Ad Astra. I do think it's really cool to see an original space film, which is just really refreshing overall. I do wish I got a little bit more out of it, but I overall did enjoy this film. So I am going to give Ad Astra overall a B-. So we're guys in my review of Ad Astra. Let me know what you guys saw this film overall. If your thoughts on it, we'll see you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.